Workers and activists across the world took to the streets on May 1st to mark International Workers' Day. Here's a recap of some of the many mobilizations held across the Americas. In Canada, demonstrations were held in cities across the country, with a large police presence reported in several cities. In Ottawa, protesters marched on Prime Minister Stephen Harper's office to protest his government's budget cuts, which could cost thousands of public workers their jobs. In Toronto, thousands of protesters rallied at City Hall before marching through the streets, with reports of traffic blockades and calls for a 24-hour reoccupation of an undisclosed public space by the Occupy movement. Several marches were also held in Montreal, including one by an anti-capitalist group with clashes reported with police, as well as another led by thousands of students on strike in response to a provincial government plan to increase tuition rates. A number of mobilizations were held across New York City, with organized labor, immigrants' rights, and Occupy movements participating in marches before convening on Wall Street later in the evening. Some banks like Chase and Bank of America were targeted throughout the day, with large deployments of police and a number of arrests reported. Chicago, considered by many to be the birthplace of the United States labor movement, was the scene of a number of demonstrations also targeting banks, with a large contingency of immigration reform activists and anti-austerity groups participating. In Seattle, thousands of demonstrators marched on a downtown Wells Fargo branch, with the Occupy movement calling for a general strike. There were reports of isolated violence against bank branches and other businesses, with police responding with pepper spray and tear gas. Clashes were also reported with police and some demonstrators in Oakland, California, with members of the Occupy movement also calling for a general strike. In Los Angeles, protesters held rallies downtown demanding immigration reform and economic equality, while more than 1,000 union members staged a one-day strike at Los Angeles International Airport, denouncing unfair labor practices. Arrests were reported near the airport, as some demonstrators attempted to block an intersection as part of the May Day action. In Arizona, marches were held in Tucson, denouncing border militarization and attacks on immigrant communities, while reiterating calls to bring back the city's now suspended Mexican American Studies program. Cities across Mexico also witnessed large mobilizations, with labor groups calling on the government to do more to protect workers' rights and reconsider its strategy in addressing organized crime and violence. Some key labor groups boycotted the mobilizations, citing a lack of general security. Protests were also held throughout Central America. In Honduras, thousands of demonstrators came out in cities across the country, denouncing the privatization of public services and attacks on teachers, increases in fuel prices, and ongoing government land seizures from campesino workers. Massive parades were held in Cuba, celebrating the country's revolution and vowing to preserve and perfect socialism. In Venezuela, large-scale demonstrations were held by both government supporters as well as opposition members, with the actions either celebrating or contesting a recently approved labor law that the government says will protect workers. A number of mobilizations were held across Colombia, with the largest taking place in the capital city of Bogotá. Labor groups, students, and others protested the government's free trade agreements, with arrests reported in the capital. In Chile, thousands of protesters took to the streets as the country's large student movement continued to assert its demands for quality public education, while workers also called on the government to raise the minimum wage and ensure the protection of workers. With the Real News Network, this is David Doherty.